A robotic arm swings across a job site in China, grabs a brick, sets it, and swings back for the next one. No pause, no break, no lunch. Engineers time it against the human crew standing 20 feet away, and the arm is pulling ahead fast. This isn't a trade show toy. It's a working prototype, tested on a real historic building, moving at a pace that makes the mason beside it look frozen. And here's what almost nobody mentions. This one arm is just a test unit for something far bigger, rising inside what China now calls its Robot Valley. Let's slow down because the clip alone doesn't tell you the real story. A skilled human mason, on a good day, sets a brick roughly every 90 seconds. That's the honest baseline, not an insult, just physics. Lifting, angling, checking level, buttering mortar onto the edge, tapping it into place hour after hour, in heat, in dust, on scaffolding that sways slightly with every step. This arm barely pauses for any of that. It doesn't stop for water. It doesn't stop because its back hurts. Here's why that matters more than it sounds like it should. China isn't running out of bricks. It's running out of bricklayers. That's not exaggeration for a title, that's a demographic fact, and you're about to see the numbers behind it. Stay with this, because the origin story explains the price of what's happening here far better than the video clip does. The company behind this arm didn't build it to go viral. It's owned by one of the biggest home builders on Earth, and that company is currently in serious financial trouble, which makes this robot either its most important bet or its most desperate one. By the end of this, you'll understand why the number everyone's repeating about how many times faster this robot supposedly isn't even attached to the right machine. And once you see why China actually needs this thing, the headline is going to look almost conservative. Do not skip the next part, because it changes what you think you're watching. So let's start with what's real, because it is real. In 2021, engineers from Shanghai Construction Group brought a 6-axis robotic arm onto a genuinely historic renovation site, the memorial hall marking the founding site of the Communist Party in Shanghai. Not a lab, not a demo stage built for cameras, a live, delicate job on a curved wall, the kind of geometry that usually terrifies automation engineers, because a robot that's only ever practiced on straight lines will fall apart the moment a wall bends. The arm used a suction gripper to lift each brick, an automatic feed system to keep bricks coming without a human handing them over, a mortar pump timed precisely to the rhythm of the arm's swing, and slam navigation, the same kind of mapping software that lets a robot vacuum figure out your living room without bumping into the couch, to track its own position in real time, adjusting on the fly. In roughly 25 minutes, it laid 77 bricks on that curved section. Read that pace again. That's about a brick every 20 seconds, sustained, on a shape that isn't flat, isn't forgiving, and isn't something you'd hand to a first-year apprentice on day one. Here's the problem. The one most videos never get to, because most stop the story right there, at the words, "Look how fast." Speed was never really the headline. The headline is what's missing from that job site: young workers. For decades, China's construction industry ran on a river of migrant labor. Men leaving rural provinces for the cities, stacking brick, pouring concrete, welding rebar, building the skyline one shift at a time, sending money home twice a year. That river is drying up, and it's drying up fast. In 2014, construction workers made up about 22% of China's entire migrant workforce. By 2023, that number had fallen to roughly 15%. Do the math on that, because it's brutal. More than 15 million workers have left the trade in under a decade. 15 million people. That's not a shortage, that's an exodus. And it happened quietly enough that most people outside the industry never noticed. And it's not just fewer workers, it's older ones. The average migrant construction worker in China is now over 43 years old. Workers 50 and older make up more than 30% of that entire labor pool. In 2022, regulators actually banned men over 60 from working on construction sites at all, citing safety. Picture that for a second. An industry that used to run on young men climbing scaffolding now has a hard age ceiling on who's even allowed up there, and fewer people underneath that ceiling to replace them. This is the part most people miss. The robot arm isn't stealing a job from a 25-year-old bricklayer. Often, there simply isn't a 25-year-old bricklayer left to replace. So, who's building the machine that's supposed to fill that gap? That question takes us somewhere you probably didn't expect. Straight into the boardroom of one of China's biggest and most troubled real estate developers. In July of 2018, a company called Dream Robotics was founded in Shunde, in Foshan, Guangdong province. It wasn't a scrappy robotic startup working out of a garage on venture capital. It was created and funded by Country Garden, at the time one of the largest home builders in the world, whose chairman reportedly pledged billions of yuan toward what the company started calling its Robot Valley. Think about what that means. This wasn't a side project or a marketing stunt dressed up for a keynote. A company that built entire cities' worth of apartment towers looked at its own labor pipeline and decided the long-term fix wasn't hiring more workers. It was building robots to replace the ones it couldn't find. For a while, it actually looked like it was working, and it looked like it was working at a scale nobody in the West was matching. By the company's own reporting, Dream scaled fast, really fast. Depending on which of the company's own releases you read, it claims somewhere between 1,600 and over 5,000 robot units delivered, deployed across hundreds of projects in dozens of Chinese provinces, covering anywhere from 10 million to over 40 million square meters of construction. Now notice something, those numbers don't agree with each other. That gap, anywhere from 10 million to 40 million square meters, a fourfold spread in the company's own reporting, is itself a signal. Nobody has independently audited these figures. Their company reported, not verified. But here's what's not in dispute. This became, by scale, one of the largest fleets of construction robots on the planet. And the bricklaying arm you saw in the opening clip is only one small piece of that fleet. Most of Dream's robots don't lay brick at all. They level floors, spray putty, apply plaster, lay tile. The masonry robot is almost a footnote inside a much bigger automation push. That's not a knock on it, that's the actual scale of the ambition here, and it's bigger than any single viral clip could show you. But here's what the fleet still can't do, and this is where the engineering gets genuinely hard, not just impressive. Mortar isn't like pouring concrete into a mold. It behaves like what engineers call a non-Newtonian fluid. Its thickness changes depending on how it's disturbed, how long it's been mixed, even the humidity that particular day. A batch that pumps perfectly at 9 in the morning can behave completely differently by noon, once the sun's been on it. Dispensing that kind of material with mechanical precision, batch after batch, hour after hour, is a nightmare problem that has quietly ended more robotics projects than any headline ever mentions. On top of that, real job sites never match the blueprint. Walls aren't perfectly straight, corners aren't perfectly square, door openings, window frames, decorative face brick, all of that still needs a human hand and a human eye, correcting the small errors a robot can't yet see, let alone fix on its own. Even Australia's famous Hadrian X bricklaying robot, after more than a decade of development and tens of millions of dollars of engineering, eventually abandoned traditional mortar entirely and switched to a fast-curing adhesive just to make its own system work reliably outdoors, in wind, in heat, on sites that never sit still long enough for a robot's first plan to survive contact with reality. This is the part that explains why China's masonry robots are still pilot projects, not standard equipment on every site. The technology is real. The rollout is still early. Both of those things are true at once, and that's exactly why the number attached to this story deserves a closer look. Which brings us back to that number everyone's repeating. You've probably seen the claim, a Chinese robot laying bricks 6 times faster than a human crew. So fast that construction unions supposedly went silent. Here's where the story turns, and pay close attention, because this is the honest version. The 6 times number is real. It's just not this robot's number. It belongs to a machine called SAM 100, built by a company called Construction Robotics in Victor, New York, an American machine tested and marketed years before this Chinese arm ever touched a brick. SAM 100 was reported capable of laying up to 3,000 bricks in a single day, compared to roughly 500 for a human mason. And that is where the 6 times comparison actually comes from, and it's been repeated so many times online that it's picked up a new address along the way. And the unions? They weren't speechless. The International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers in the United States responded to SAM 100 publicly, on the record, through a spokesman who said the union supported research and technology that advances the trade, while acknowledging it could take jobs, not panic, not silence, a measured, on-the-record statement from people whose livelihoods were genuinely on the line. No union anywhere, in China or the West, has been documented reacting to a Chinese bricklaying robot at all. So why does any of that matter? Because once you strip away the borrowed number and the invented silence, the real story underneath is stranger and bigger than the myth. China doesn't need the fastest bricklaying robot on Earth. It needs millions of slower, cheaper, good enough ones deployed everywhere at once, because the workforce that used to do this job is vanishing faster than any single machine's top speed could ever fix. This is where the story stops being about one arm and becomes about an entire national strategy, and this is exactly where the headline starts to make sense for a reason most people missed entirely. In 2020, China's Ministry of Housing and Urban-Rural Development issued a national directive pushing what it called smart construction. It paired robotics with prefabricated building methods across the industry. This wasn't a suggestion aimed at one ambitious company. By November of 2022, the ministry had named 24 official pilot cities for this program. By 2023, over 500 companies had been designated as backbone enterprises in the effort, dozens of new technical standards had been published, and at least 6 cities had already built robot-assisted labor into their official construction pricing schedules. Read that again. Governments don't write pricing rules for a novelty act. They write them for something they expect to become permanent infrastructure, something they're planning around for decades, not one good headline. And this is where the human cost of the labor crisis stops being an abstract statistic and becomes something you can actually picture. Imagine a man in his 50s, decades of scaffolding behind him, no formal pension built around a career like his, watching a robotic arm take over the exact motion his hands have repeated 10,000 times over 20 years. He's not angry at the machine. He's just tired, and there's genuinely no one lining up behind him to take his place when he finally has to stop, because his own son went into logistics or delivery driving instead, where the hours are shorter and the pay is steadier. That's the real reason the union's speechless line falls apart under scrutiny. Not because people are thrilled about automation, but because in China's construction sector, the silence isn't shock. It's absence. There's barely a young workforce left to organize a protest in the first place, let alone go quiet in the face of one machine. Which is exactly why the company betting billions on this future looked unstoppable until it very much wasn't. Country Garden, the parent company bankrolling Bright Dream's entire robot valley, spiraled into a severe debt crisis starting in 2023, defaulting on obligations and entering restructuring that's still unfolding today. Executive turnover, layoffs across the business, half-built towers sitting unfinished in cities across the country, scaffolding still up, cranes gone quiet, apartments already sold to families who are still waiting to move in. This is the kind of collapse that shows up in the background of the very cities this company helped build. Here's the twist that most viewers never see coming. The same company placing a generational bet on robots replacing scarce human labor is simultaneously struggling to survive as a business at all. So is the robot revolution collapsing along with its parent company? Or is that question exactly backwards? Is the labor crisis actually forcing this kind of automation to keep spreading with or without Country Garden, because the underlying demographic problem doesn't disappear just because one developer's balance sheet does? Now zoom out, because construction robots are not an isolated Chinese experiment. According to the International Federation of Robotics, China accounted for 54% of every industrial robot installed on the planet in 2024, 295,000 new units in a single year, more than most of the rest of the world combined. That's not just factory arms welding car doors or packing warehouse shelves, though it includes plenty of that too. It's the same underlying industrial machine, vertically integrated manufacturing, state-aligned policy, aggressive scaling, showing up on a construction site instead of an assembly line. This is where a single viral clip stops looking like a novelty and starts looking like one visible edge of something enormous happening across Chinese manufacturing as a whole. And this is exactly the point where global competitors have to pay attention, because they're not sitting comfortably either. Australia's FBR, the company behind that Hadrian X robot with the real 6x comparison lineage, has spent more than 15 years developing its machine, over a decade of prototypes, test builds, and investor pitches, and by 2025, it was cutting costs deeply, trimming its board and bringing its founder back in as CEO just to keep the company stable. 15 years is a long time to still be calling something early stage, and it tells you exactly how hard this problem actually is, no matter which country is trying to solve it. In the Netherlands, a company called Monumental has raised tens of millions of dollars and now operates more than 150 bricklaying robots across the UK and Netherlands, charging contractors per brick rather than per robot, a pricing model built specifically because construction firms don't want to gamble on owning the machine outright. Here's the problem for anyone assuming this is a solved technology anywhere in the world. None of these companies, American, Australian, Dutch, or Chinese, has actually cracked mass-market bricklaying automation at a cost that makes it the obvious default choice yet. China being early stage here isn't damning. It's normal. Everyone building this technology is still early, still iterating, still losing money on plenty of projects to figure out what actually works at scale, and still waiting for the one breakthrough that turns a promising pilot into a standard piece of equipment on every job site. And if you're a buyer or a builder anywhere in the world, this is where the story stops being abstract. A robot that lays brick faster doesn't automatically make housing cheaper or more available. Land costs, financing, permits, and approvals shape a housing market just as much as labor speed does, arguably more. Robots can compress the construction timeline. They cannot, by themselves, fix a housing shortage rooted in financing and zoning and land supply. That's the trade-off most people skip past when a viral clip promises a revolution. The machine can be genuinely impressive and still only solve one narrow piece of a much bigger, much slower problem. The wall goes up faster, the permit still takes months, the loan still has to clear. None of that changes because an arm can lay brick every 20 seconds. So here's the honest, full picture, all the pieces together. A real robotic arm laid real brick on a real historic building, faster than the mason working beside it. That part of the headline holds up, and it holds up under real scrutiny. The 77 bricks in 25 minutes actually happened. The curved wall actually happened. The 6x figure and the Union silence, though, were borrowed from a completely different machine, built on the other side of the planet, and that correction doesn't shrink the story, and it points to a bigger one. China isn't chasing a speed record, it's trying to patch an enormous, fast-growing hole in its construction workforce with hundreds of thousands of robots, backed by national policy, deployed by a company whose own parent is fighting for survival, inside a country that's already responsible for the majority of the world's new industrial robots every single year. The wall was never really the story. The workforce standing underneath it, the one that's disappearing, always was. The robot didn't replace the bricklayer. In a very real sense, the bricklayer already left, years before the robot ever showed up to take the photo. If this helped you see what's actually being built behind that one viral clip, stick around, because the next piece of this, the next factory floor inside that same robot valley, is even bigger and stranger than this one. But here's the real question worth sitting with. If a robot could build your next home faster and possibly cheaper, but the company behind it might not survive the decade financially, would that change how you feel about trusting it? And zoom out even further, is China actually solving a labor shortage with robots, or discovering out of necessity that robots are simply the only workforce it can still afford to hire? Leave your answer in the comments, because this argument is far from settled, and it is only going to get louder as more of these arms show up on more job sites in more countries faster than anyone expected.